Thank you, Lauren. Take a look at what some of the differences are between on-site teams and global virtual teams. I wonder how many of these have affected you in your work. And to do that, I'm going to ask you to click on the little arrow next to your name over in the upper left-hand corner and just raise your hand to give us an indication of whether or not, if you've been affected by some of these changes, go ahead and raise your hand.
All right. Seems like everybody is lighting up with their hand raised. That's pretty good.
I see that. So these are things that are happening all across our work lives, and they impact how we work with others and how we achieve results with others. Let me share with you that there are 4 key factors that differentiate co-located teams, or those teams that are located, whose members are located physically on the same floor and within the same general area. What are the differences between those teams and from dispersed teams? These 4 factors are geography, technology, culture, and time. And they have a huge impact on team members' ability to build trusting, positive relationships, and their ability to align themselves behind the team's purpose and vision. And these 4 factors, are critical to high performance of virtual teams. Let's take a look at what some of the differences are between virtual and face-to-face teams. In some research that was done by RW3 Culture Wizard, here's what some respondents said were major challenges when it came to managing conflict, making decisions, expressing opinions, delivering quality output, and generating innovative ideas. And again, I'm going to ask you to raise your hand if you've experienced some of these challenges in your work with virtual teams.
Okay.
And again, we're seeing a number of hands raised, so that many of you have also experienced this. Here's some research, some additional research from MIT Sloan related to the impact of physical distance on team performance. Take a look at the impact of distance as it grows from team members who are on the same floor to those who are located on different continents. When we're talking about effectiveness, we're looking at product quality, reliability, and customer satisfaction. When we're looking at efficiency, we're looking at adherence to budget and schedule restraints. Here's the main point. Small distances matter. Team members who are in the same building but on different floors many times do not consider themselves as being dispersed, and they oftentimes underestimate the barriers to collaboration simply from having to climb a set of stairs to meet face-to-face. Think about what collaboration barriers you might observe among your team members and leaders. So the question becomes what's a virtual team member to do? And at Partners Development, we work at creating tools and resources to assist leaders and team members to navigate that whitewater of virtual teamwork, as well as provide development experiences to help them succeed. So we've talked about what some of the factors are that influence virtual work and some of the challenges that mobile workers face. What I want to share with you are ways that successful mobile team members deal with them and bridge the perceived distance. We're going to look at 5 strategies very quickly for how you can create some of those bridges. So let's look at the first strategy. The first strategy begins with B, and that represents build relationships. Building relationships with your manager and other team members is essential. And high trust in particular is a critical ingredient to all teams, and it's more difficult to develop high trust in the absence of face-to-face communication. Let me tell you a little bit about trust and how you can develop it in a virtual world. There are 2 types of trust, cognitive and emotional. Cognitive is trust that's based on rational or calculated assessments. It's based on one's perceived integrity and ability. It's about, as I said, the rational part of our brain that says, this is a person who can be trusted to provide what they've committed to. So for example, if Lauren and I are on a team together and my experience with her is that she has expertise in her area, she follows through on her commitments and is collaborative, I'll extend her my trust, but within limits. And I'll talk more about that in just a moment. Here are what I call the 4 C's of building cognitive trust. Credibility means that people perceive you as having expertise to deliver what's needed. People trust your judgment and your knowledge. Consistency is represented when you're perceived as reliable and that you walk your talk and can be counted on to behave as expected. Remember, trust is about perception. It's not whether or not we perceive ourselves as trustworthy. It's do others perceive us as trustworthy. Communication is related to the perception by others that you're open to their ideas and their concerns. People trust you to give them timely feedback and that you're also willing to receive feedback. And consideration, the 4th C, is about people believing that you care about them and that you're willing to look out for their interests even if they're not present. These 4 C's will go a long way in building trust with others, but that's only part of the equation. Emotional trust is trust that results from the social bonds developed in a relationship where there's genuine care and concern for the welfare of another person, and it's based on assessments of benevolence. It generally occurs after one has earned some cognitive trust. Emotional trust is that product of the bonds that come when people sense that others care about them. And it's crucial for long-term productive relationships. Team members who demonstrate high levels of emotional intelligence will reach higher levels of performance than their counterparts. And remember, people don't follow people they don't trust. How many of you are already familiar with emotional intelligence? Give me a little up arrow, if you will, to let me know whether or not, a hands up, if you are already familiar with emotional intelligence. Okay, we have some who are. There's a lot of good research on emotional intelligence, and it's essential for us to be able to lead happy, successful lives. I'm going to briefly summarize some of the results of the research, much of which has been done by Daniel Goleman. Take a look at both of these columns. It used to be believed that the smartest people made the best leaders, and that leadership was really a function of IQ. But with Goleman's research and some others, some surprising things occurred. Emotional intelligence is a differentiating factor between the difference of average performance and high performance. In fact, 90% of the difference between average and outstanding leaders was linked to their emotional intelligence. It's twice as important as IQ and technical expertise combined, and it's 4 times as important to overall success. A mobile workforce that is more diverse utilizes technology to communicate in the absence of face-to-face interactions requires that all members exercise high levels of emotional intelligence in order to achieve those high levels of performance. Now, as I've mentioned, national culture also influences team performance, and it's important and very useful to learn. And you can't assume that even if someone was born in the same country you were, that they share the same cultural values. National culture influences team performance. Some common challenges that are experienced by team members of different cultures are understanding accents, different meanings attached to words, differences in building trust, recognition and rewards, and the interpretation of silence. Think about what you know about the national cultures of your team members. As I said, culture matters And the better you understand the culture of your team members, the more information you'll have to understand them. We're all individuals, so know people as individuals first, but we're also product of our culture, and culture matters. Here's some resources that I've found to be particularly helpful. And if you need more information about national cultures of your team, these are a couple of good ones that I've found. There probably are others, and if you know of other resources, go ahead and type those into group chat. In the meantime, let us also know whether or not how you've learned about the cultures of your team members, either through training or suggested readings, perhaps other internet websites, discussions with team members. Nicole, I see, adds that CIA.gov has good information about doing business in a country. So that's great, Nicole. Thank you. And if there are others, please continue to type those into group chat. Now, let me give you an example of how culture can lead to misunderstanding. This is a picture of me with Abdul Rahman, one of the students I had when I was in Saudi Arabia. We were in class for 8 weeks. He spoke English, and he had a very thick Arabian accent, which took me quite a while to understand. On the very last day of class, as we were saying goodbye, Abdul Rahman came up to me and said what I thought was, "Thank you, I hope I see you dead." I looked at him and I paused for a moment and I said, "Could you repeat that?" And when he did, it was then that I understood him to say, "Thank you, I hope I see you again." Never underestimate the importance of good listening. The second bridge is to represent accountability. And I see that Jackie may have a question, so Lauren, whenever it's convenient, if Jackie has that question, I'm happy to answer that.
Okay, great.
The second strategy is R, and that represents accountability. Accountability is choosing to take action to achieve results. It's making and keeping personal commitments, and it's answering for one's actions. Oftentimes, accountability can be summed up by the phrase, "I'll own it." What we find is most people want to be accountable. However, it's not that everyone perceives accountability in the same way. In fact, there is no word in Spanish that exactly translates into accountability. So we have to be more specific about what we expect of others. We've already talked about the two types of trust. DWY, SYWD represents do what you say you will do and initiate action. Communicating progress, offering assistance to other team members is a way to represent accountability. And since most team members' work occurs outside of team meetings, communication with other team members can be really important. Our next strategy is making the implicit explicit. And this is something that I referred to just a few minutes ago. When we're working virtually, there are many more opportunities for misunderstandings. And with fewer opportunities to see our fellow team members face-to-face, we have to leverage communications technology to accomplish our goals, information sharing, and decision making. How many of you have experienced misunderstandings when you communicate via technology? Again, I'm going to ask you, to raise your hands. Yes, indeed, it does happen. Oftentimes we know what we mean, but we fail to do so directly by not stating explicitly what we mean. And that leaves the door open to misinterpretation and misunderstandings. Let me give you a few examples. How many times have you heard someone at work say, "Please respond as soon as possible"? spend some time on this project, but not too much time. Let me get back to you as soon as I can. You get the idea. Let me share with you a couple more reasons why being explicit about our communication is very important. We're going to ask you a question in a moment. I'm going to go to the next slide, which is a poll, but I want you to think about this. Experts tell us that we listen effectively what percentage of the time? Let's go to that poll and see what you think. Experts tell us that we listen effectively what percentage of the time? Go ahead and make your vote.
All right, it's coming in pretty quickly. And I'm going to close the poll in 3, 2, 1. All right, let's look at the results.
All right.
Oh, very good.
Oh, okay. So 82% of you said 25% of the time. A little over 10%, almost 12%, said 35% of the time, and almost 6% of you said 55%. The correct answer is 25% of the time. Now think about that for a minute. That means that most of us are missing about 75% of what the other person is saying. In a teleconference where the temptation is to multitask is high, when that temptation is high, I would guess that it's even lower than 25%. That's why we've developed tools to support leaders and team members. Teams that have members who are not clear about how the work is done or who have unenforced norms invariably get into trouble. That's why we developed a template for the team operating agreement. A team operating agreement is a tool that describes how members communicate and work together. It's been quoted that about 70% of remote working relationships fail due to a lack of communications and unclear roles and expectations. A team operating agreement is a tool to establish clear communication protocols and work goals. Now, our fourth strategy is to develop yourself. One of the most common concerns that mobile team members have is about opportunities for development and advancement in their careers. There's this certain fear of out of sight, out of mind syndrome. Team members are concerned that they may not get the same feedback and coaching as their on-site counterparts, and that they might be overlooked for promotions. That's why it's important to be proactive in developing your skills as a mobile team member. And I'm going to share with you some ways to do that. There's been some good research. Let me come back a minute here. There's been some good research about what makes for a successful mobile team member. And in addition to the development needs that I've already mentioned, here are some additional things to consider. Here are the competencies that research has identified as critical to members of high-performing global virtual teams. Self-awareness, self-management, and relationship management are related to successful team members' emotional intelligence. And depending on your role and the team, some of the other competencies may be more important than others. We offer an assessment so that you can identify your strengths and development needs as a member of your team. And that'll begin to give you some ideas for what you can do to advance your development. Then talk to your leader and create a development plan that describes how you want to build those skills. The G represents get tech savvy. As mobile team members, we rely a lot more on technology to communicate, collaborate, and accomplish our individual work tasks. So here are some key points to help you get and stay tech savvy. I don't know about all of the various forms of technology that you use to communicate and collaborate from a distance with other team members, but I'd be willing to guess they could be used to a greater advantage to share information and foster relationships. For information sharing, there are some really good tools out now for document sharing and collaboration, tracking projects, providing status reports, and productivity. So if you don't know how to use these tools, find somebody who can help you because they really make a difference. But information sharing is only part of the benefit of these tools. These tools can also be used to build team member relationships and grow trust. And let me give you a few examples. Make sure that you have pictures of all of the team members on your team web page. For team members who are in other locations, some teams actually have members make a little video of their office and post it for other team members to see. It builds some context and gives some relationships. Use the tools offered by web conferencing technology to keep engagement during these sessions. So use polls, chats, annotation tools, and breakout rooms that are now available on most platforms. And these tools keep members engaged and they facilitate decision making. You know, the biggest reason technology isn't leveraged more is that team members and leaders don't know how to use it. So get tech savvy and your team is going to be more productive and more fun. Here's some quick tips for leveraging communication and collaboration technology. Excuse me. The last one's particularly important. Match the communication method to the message. That means using the right technology to get your point across. Sometimes that's best done with video conferencing. Other times a text message will do. The point is to think about how you can use the technology to your advantage and not add to confusion. And as one virtual team leader once told me, if you can't solve a problem in 2 emails, pick up the phone. Excuse me. Okay, here's the last strategy. The E represents engage. Leveraging technology can be especially helpful during virtual meetings, and that's one way to foster engagement, but that's only part of the solution. As mobile team members, it's a challenge to stay in touch with others. We have to be more intentional about connecting in order to maintain strong work relationships and collaborate. And since most of the work takes place outside of team meetings, it's important to keep in contact with others on the team, especially when our work is highly interdependent. In other words, when the work of one team member affects the results of another team member. It's really important to stay in line. That's why I recommend one-on-one coaching meetings with our managers. Here's a simple outline for a one-on-one coaching meeting that I use. It could look something like this. It's a discussion about what's going well, what's not going well, and what could be done better. The purpose of these meetings is to proactively identify successes and potential problems and figure out what to do about them, if anything. As mobile team members, we need to actively participate and maybe even initiate these meetings to ensure that we're on track and aligned with our goals. The coaching part of these meetings, remember, is not about solving someone else's problem for them, but it's about helping them to think and talk through how they can solve their own challenges. And this is also an outline that can be used for peer coaching that's highly effective. Virtual meetings are often viewed as a blessing and sometimes a curse. Many people hate virtual meetings, team meetings, because they're often poorly run. They're not engaging and consequently lead team members to occupy themselves by multitasking. Virtual team meetings require more preparation and more planning in order to make them focus and effective. Here's a comparison of a typical meeting with a best practice virtual meeting. Oftentimes we blame leaders for these meetings for our lack of engagement, but there are some things that we can do to make meetings more effective as members. Here's a list of my top 10 suggestions for how you can make virtual team meetings more effective. I'm not going to read all these to you, but I'm going to offer you a challenge. Read through this list and type into chat what's one thing you could do to make your team meetings more effective. And let's see what comes up. What's one thing you could do to make your virtual team meetings more effective?
Lee, I would say for me, you have mine on there, actively listen as number 5. It's so hard when you're not in front of someone to make sure that they're actually listening to you. So I know what we're doing with the games and the interaction, that really keeps everybody engaged so they don't drop off of the call or, start doing 3 other things at the same time.
Right. I see Francis offers summarize your understanding before moving on to the next topic. Shared facilitation. Elizabeth says focus. Nicole says sign on early. J.K. says know how to use the meeting technology. That's really an important one. Julie says offer to take minutes. Stuart says make sure to publish the minutes and ensure that there's understanding after the fact. Keith adds if the group is less than 9, use FaceTime. That's a great suggestion, Keith. Nicole adds to that, use video when possible. So these are things that as members of mobile and virtual teams, we can do to make virtual team meetings more effective. And that means sometimes offering to our leaders ways in which suggestions and ways in which people can participate to make virtual teams more and more effective. So thanks. These are some great suggestions. Building relationships, representing accountability, making the implicit explicit, developing yourself, getting tech savvy, engaging. These are the strategies you can apply to bridge the perceived difference. The question is now, what will you do with them to bridge your perceived distance? I'm going to offer you 3 last top suggestions, and then I'd like to go to questions. The first one is to educate yourself about the differences between on-site and virtual teams so that you can assist your leaders and members in adapting to the differences of virtual teamwork and apply some of these best practices with your team. Secondly, communicate to understand your team's purpose, your role, and the role of other team members. Apply some of these techniques we've discussed to build trust and be clear about assignments.